How are you today?
I am a little bit chilly still, but the weather is turning around where I am. So this is where I am. So welcome to Northern Florida.
I am waiting for whatever to crawl out of that bog, and we're gonna catch it on camera. And as we mentioned before our show, we're gonna sell it for millions of dollars. I hope you're okay afterwards, but we'll deal with it.
Yeah, what the audience doesn't know is I actually said to you, if there is an alligator behind me, you're going to tell me, right? And you
I'm
said,
gonna
well, at some point, I'll tell you.
I'm gonna record the crap out of it.
Exactly. Make $1 million.
Oh dear. Well, today we're talking about one of the hottest topics, no pun intended, which is
Yeah.
the link between mental health and menopause and perimenopause, because you can't leave me out of this conversation. I'm
No,
hanging out in
no.
perimenopause, I'm sure of it, and there's lots of people that need this information. So we had to go all the way to Abu Dhabi to talk to our guest today. Kimothy, do you want to tell us a little bit more about our guest?
Yeah, Ann Marie McQueen has a long history of journalism in Ottawa, and she is a very experienced modern day storyteller. So in 2020, she started this podcast, Hotflash Inc. So, of course, I started watching right away because it applied to me, and she's become one of the world leaders in podcasting. She's even in the process of writing a book on the topic, and that's going to be so huge for everybody. So, for everyone out there, grab a coffee and just hang out with us for a bit.
Well, we get into it. Well,
Yeah,
let's
we're
welcome
gonna
Anne
get
Marie in to the Inner Shift podcast. Hey, Anne Marie, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
We're very happy to have you. Hopefully, all the ladies are tuned in with their coffee, listening, because we need to know all of the goods. Like, tell us everything, because I need to know what I'm dealing with, what I'm walking into, and what happens afterwards. And I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Oh
and you
yeah.
know what? Anne Marie were so much younger when we met as young reporters in Canada. So, speaking of age, because Amy is much, much younger than we are, we're going to focus on both perimenopause and menopause, which Amy mentioned, but also the connection to women's mental health.
Okay. Oh, where to begin? That does
Yeah,
feel like that was eons ago, decades,
it was.
Timothy.
It was.
I was so in awe of you because you were on television and always so polished.
Um, and I can say that I was in awe of you, not only because I found out how many people were going to your going away party, but you were far more intellectual about the process of storytelling, where we were a little bit of flash and grab. And I always thought, like, she's so smart. She's so
Stop it.
smart.
Oh
I
my God, I
know.
never felt, and I always felt inferior because I worked for The Sun, which is a tabloid. Everyone's always got their thing, right? Like there's always a reason to feel like you're not good enough. I just think that's funny. I think that's a younger woman thing. Um,
I think there's a really good song about that, feeling not good enough. And that's why we want to have the podcast, because exploring mental health, I don't think can be done without talking about menopause and perimenopause. And you interview people now from all over the world. So can you just talk a little bit about what the connection is between mental health and menopause and perimenopause? Because Amy should be warned.
I'm taking notes.
Yeah.
Tell me everything.
yeah, well, I mean, most of the problem happens in perimenopause. And
Great, Anne
Oh,
Marie.
also it's
Thanks.
fun. Fun.
I started calling it like the massive midlife shift because to me now, I'm 54. I've been through menopause and I'm alive and I've lived to tell it and I'm much better off. But I feel like the more I study this, the more I find it really hard to pull apart all the things that happen to us by the time we get to our 40s. And then you have the hormonal shift on top of it. It's like, it's just really, and then the pressures of, having aging parents and having kids who are teenagers and having maybe your relationship breaking down and maybe you getting sick of your career, like all of these things just like the great merger of crap storm. So it's very different for everyone. and there are some similarities. So, first of all, say you're just like an absolutely normal person, which none of us are.
No.
And you enter your late 30s, early 40s, and you just like, one of these even Steven people we know that just don't seem to get ruffled. Their monthly cycle doesn't bother them that much. Say you're one of those people, you still could start to take a hit in the earliest stages of perimenopause, or even what's the very understudied late reproductive stage, which doesn't really even have, like, no one's paying attention to it, but it's sort of like some things can start to happen, but you're still considered premenopausal. But what happens is progesterone starts to recede, and progesterone is how sort of governs our stress response. So you often hear people talking about anxiety and trouble sleeping, and just sort of having those in the earliest stages. And I think that's where mental health, um, where it starts. And then it can get pretty hairy in perimenopause, because your estrogen, the story we're told is that this transition is all about your estrogen just going like this. But your estrogen is rising and falling, and your progesterone is receding, and then testosterone's been receding for quite a while. So, uh, anxiety, low mood, all of these things can happen. Social anxiety. I just hit a wall in my early 40s, and I was not normal. And I can tell you about me, but everyone brings all their bags with them, right? So, my particular bags that I brought to my 40s were, you know, not dealing with trauma in my life. And I now know that includes trauma from my childhood, but also trauma from my career. Like, I never realized that for the last couple of years. I have a friend who's a neuroscientist who said, Marie, like, it's not normal to know what a decomposing body smells like. It's not normal to spend time with people over and over who've just
Oh
lost
my
someone,
gosh.
and go into how many situations did I go into where people had just died and had to
Yeah.
deal with it, and saw it, and I saw body parts, and like, I've just realized that I didn't even know that or think about it. And so that's just telling you about me, right? And then, I never got married or had kids. I was carrying that hope with me and that grief with me. And then just all my tendencies to deal with that, which were overwork, um, like numbing with shopping. I liked to binge drink. So enjoy it. I never a regular drinker, just really like to go to town on the weekend. So I had all those sort of like coping mechanisms, and I just hit a wall in my early 40s. And it started with, I had reoccurring nightmares that I was dying. Um, I had developed a fear of flying. I was, long haul flights from Abu Dhabi. I've taken two a year. All of a sudden, I had to drink like a triple whiskey to get on the plane. I started having social anxiety, like just feeling so uncomfortable in my own skin, having really big, like, I'd always been a sort of ruminator and excessive, um, obsessive thinker, but that became crazy. And I was a manager at the time. So it was very, very, very hard. Like, I always felt like Michael Scott from The Office when I like everything I said. Like, I couldn't. So these were the things that were happening for me. You hear these things over and over from people, and then just not sleeping, waking up, I had morning dread. And then it just, through perimenopause, the mental health parts of it shifted and ebbed and flowed. And there was a period of time when I would just wake up. I got rid of the nightmares, but I would just wake up in the middle of the night, 3 or 4, and not get back to sleep, or wake up with morning dread. Um, just a terribly, terribly hard time. And I didn't know that I was in perimenopause, so that made it a lot worse. But I've since learned that just knowing this is very helpful. There's a lot of things that you can do, and we can talk about that. But I think the progesterone piece in perimenopause is really overlooked, and it's something that the mainstream doctors don't talk about very often, because to them, progesterone is just something you need to take if you prescribe someone estrogen. The smartest people I know, and I have these people on my expert panel, are integrative, functional people, and they know that progesterone is just as important as estrogen, and it's
Mm.
not just there to protect your uterus. So I think that's a really important piece. But I just developed a ton of tools to cope. And there are a ton of things you can do in perimenopause.
And
Okay,
Marie,
so we're going to talk about the tools shortly. Sorry, Amy, to jump in, but I just wanted to say thank you, because the reason that Amy and I are doing this is we think that there's a real benefit to sharing. And until this very moment, um, I did not know there was another human being on the planet who shared my trauma over the murder scenes that we used to cover. And to this day, you know, I'm in therapy. My therapist talks about the fact that I just glossed over the murder of Brian Smith, my colleague.
Yeah.
For those
Mhm.
that don't live in Ottawa, I glossed over. I will never forget her name, Melinda Shepard. You were probably at that crime scene in a tourist part of our city of Ottawa. And I've only just recently realized that trauma compounds, you know, and so it's not normal for human beings to know how long a body has been in the Ottawa River. It's not normal for us. So I wanted to just thank you about that. But I know Amy's going to ask you about tools because she's in perimenopause.
well, I'm going to ask about something. I'm going to bring something out. I think that two things. One that you said that hit home for me is that, in your 40s, you start unraveling trauma as well, right? And so you're dealing with that. And I don't think that we are super equipped to deal with that until this time of our life. Most of us are trying to break generational trauma, all that stuff, right? That's this generation of like 40-year-olds. And so I think that's really interesting to compound. But the other thing that I think is interesting, I'd love your thoughts on, is that like I'm an older mom, right? I didn't have my daughter until I was 36. And so I was on birth control for like 20 years. Then I got off birth control. Then I had my daughter, which is a whole other different realm of hormones. And then I've been trying to fix my hormones ever since. And so
Yeah.
then you enter into perimenopause and menopause, and your hormones are still doing all of this. And people think that we should be more sane than we are, but I don't know how to do that. Can you tell us
Yeah.
anything about kind of that fluctuating of hormones as you're kind of entering into perimenopause?
Yeah. Like, I mean, ideally, this is such a tricky subject because when you're on birth control, you're not you don't have your normal level of hormones. Your those normal levels of hormones are taken out and replaced with synthetic hormones. You're basically in menopause in when you're on hormonal birth control anyway. So that I'd love to see that studied someday. And I think everyone
Wow.
should have access to the birth control pill, but I also would like to know, when you're not ovulating for that long, when you're not, experiencing your normal levels of what that does. I would like to know that. And there are some very courageous people talking about that. Um, and your pregnancy, I don't know what kind of pregnancy you had. And this is an area I feel insecure about because I haven't had children and I haven't studied it a lot. But your pregnancy can really inform your perimenopause experience as well. And, sort of like the reason we're having, I'm starting over again. Let me start over. It's not just about hormones because we were designed to go through menopause. There's a lot of controversy about why. Why are our hormones designed to leave our lives at midlife mostly? And do men have such a smaller, slower, longer slope? Why are they still able to father children? Whatever. That's a separate issue. But we were meant to go through it. But why is it so difficult? Because we know there's hunter-gatherers and those societies, they don't even really have any symptoms. It's an environmental mismatch. It's everything that's going on around us. So your hormones from your pregnancy, depending how your pregnancy was, depending how you recovered from it, depending how you got back to your monthly cycles or you didn't get back, depending on what your personal experience with the birth control pill is. You were on it for 20 years.
Yeah, give or take.
So
That's kind of
there is data, and I was on the pill from 16 until 28, and there's data that it's not great for teenagers to go on the pill for mental health. And so, though that data of all the sort of arguments and discussions about the pill, that's pretty hard and that's pretty accepted, is that it's hard on us. So you bring that, I brought that, right? And so maybe you, after your pregnancy, you were already in the late reproductive stage, right? Maybe you were already in it. And some women, it's happening earlier, it seems to be, and we're recognizing it. So, I don't know if I'm answering your question. Like, I don't know what you're supposed to do about it, but I think there's a lot of people who are so obsessed with testing and figuring out, and I went and checked my levels and whatever. I don't really think it matters. If you're feeling hormonally imbalanced and you're at the age near perimenopause, then you can start thinking about it as perimenopause, I think. It is a
But
long run.
I have a question about that because, and Amy knows this story, that when I clearly was in menopause because I chose the IUD method that puts hormones inside your uterus, an IUD. So I didn't have a period for 12 years. And when it was very clear that I was in menopause, a medical practitioner actually said to me, "You're just going to have to suck it up," because a family doctor just decided that because I get migraines, it would be a bad idea for me to do hormone replacement therapy. So I have never forgotten, like, you're just going to have to suck it up.
Yeah.
And I did not suck it up well. Let me tell you, that was a really chaotic period in my life. Also going through a divorce and, my daughter going away to university all at the same time,
Yep.
huge life changes. And here I am, basically an unstable human being. So through your podcast, have you learned um, how women can get around the fact that the health industry, as I call it, doesn't always want to participate in how to help you?
Yeah, that's a tough one because I just did an episode with a woman who is a podcast or sorry, a migraine specialist, and she was talking about how ill-equipped the medical system is with dealing with migraines, which I'm sure you're aware.
Yep.
And I just think get a second and a third opinion and a fourth opinion, and get an opinion from a naturopathic doctor, and get an opinion from or an integrative physician and functional physician, because some of these ideas are outdated. I can't speak to that specifically. I have a friend who also was told she's not a candidate because she gets aura with migraines.
That's what
Um,
I get. That's
yeah,
what I
but
get.
I
Fuzzy
don't
eyes.
know that that's, I don't know that, now they're saying that you can take hormone therapy if you've had breast cancer. That was always a big no-no, right? Like I know people,
Right.
Dr. Suzanne Gilbert-Lenz, who's one of my expert panel, she's taking hormone therapy, and she had breast cancer. So I think there's a lot of like doctors who just their knowledge went to here and they don't keep up, right? Like that's an ongoing issue.
Right.
So I think for sure checking into it. I also think it's important to understand that hormone therapy helps some women like intensely and quickly. Like my best friend didn't sleep for about a year and she was holding off. She doesn't like to take things. And then she took it. She said she started sleeping that week. Like for some people, it is that quick, but then for other people, it's a real experimentation thing. And I see people that are like, I've been trying this for a year, and then we did this, and then we did that. And it's like, I don't know that I would have the patience for that. And I don't know, when the times when my mental health was really challenged, that would have been good. I've also since found out I am very sensitive to hormones and I don't think I can take them. And
Mm.
so, and I am through menopause, and I have done the work. Do you know what I mean? I've done so much work, and I have so many tools that I could share that have helped me deal with me. Like basically like unravel and put back together who I am. And I did it without hormone therapy. That doesn't mean you can take hormone therapy and still do it. You can still get through to the other side and be fine. I just don't think we have to suffer. But I feel really uncomfortable with the hormone therapies. You just need to be on hormone therapy.
I think that like this is a good topic to bring up just so that we're putting it on the table, right? Like do what you feel is right. I mean, the other day I literally called Kimothy and I just went off about my gynecologist for like forever because they don't listen to you. Or I say that as a sweeping statement. This has been my experience with, like, I've worked with naturopaths that I've gotten way further with, and but they can't do things like ultrasounds and different things like that. They're not doing in the same realm. And so I came to them about my hormones again because I was having issues, and I didn't want to take the progesterone only IUD or whatnot. And he was physically disappointed in me. And I was like, I'm just going to ignore that you're disappointed in me as a patient because, like, this is my body. And being on hormones since I was like 16,
Yeah.
getting off, being in my natural hormones, being pregnant, trying to figure it out now, it's going all over the crazy. He just, there was nothing he was going to help me with. And he literally said, I have a bunch of stuff, but you don't want to do any of it. But he never gave me any choices. So it was like, okay, well, what do you
Makes me
do with
mad.
that? How frustrating is that?
That makes me mad. And we all have that experience our whole life, right? Trying to talk. I remember saying to my doctor, do you have, are there any new birth control methods when I was about 30 and I'd gone off the pill? And I remember him going, "Ugh, you asked this last year." Yes. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. I just thought maybe in a year something new would have come.
Yeah.
I want people to know a couple of things. Medical
Yeah.
doctors have captured the menopause conversation and they like the one we're hearing on social media for the most part, and they know a lot, and they're doing amazing work, but they are from the medical mainstream system, and that is a system that's designed to just treat and manage symptoms, to never sort of rebalance or look at the root cause. We know that, and there's been a lot of fun made of the naturopaths and integrative physicians and chiropractors, whatever, people who look for the root cause. But for example, the IUD that he wanted you to go on, it's not progesterone. It's not our bioidentical progesterone that our body makes. It's synthetic
Mhm.
progestin. That's something that's an entirely different thing. It's not replacing anything that your body makes. It's a synthetic form of progesterone. So right there, that's something that a lot of people don't know. And a lot of times, when you're offered certain kinds of hormone therapy, you can be offered the synthetic progesterone called progestin. Well, most of the issues in the research seem to lie in that synthetic progesterone, that progestin, the
Mhm.
breast cancer risk, some of the findings where hormone therapy is associated with dementia. Like, this is a very tricky subject to talk about because then
Amy,
you
this
start
is
talking
why
about
I'm
the
so
pill.
difficult with you sometimes. I was on it for a long time. See? Anne
Yeah.
Marie's smart.
That's one of the biggest things I would like people to know is that that progesterone and progestin are two separate things. They are not the same thing at all. And I've talked to mainstream doctors and pretty famous ones, and they're not that savvy about it. There's some that really don't seem to even sort of rate the difference. And that's because they come from an area that they don't spend that much time on it. And they also just think of it as like an opposite to estrogen. And the whole mainstream medical system really is obsessed with estrogen. And it's so weird. And there's this great doctor that I know that's writing a book, and there's a book called Estrogen Matters, which I don't talk about a lot because I feel like it's like estrogen, estrogen, estrogen. I just think they're way over the top on their reading of the literature, and it's not just me. Like, there's other experts that I respect. But my friend wants to write a book called Progesterone Matters because it's crazy. It's like we have more progesterone in our bodies than we do estrogen. And some doctors literally don't even know the difference between progesterone and progestin and will prescribe it interchangeably without thinking about it. And so I
Mhm.
always say, like, you kind of have to be the CEO of your own health, but I know it's so tiring and frustrating. But I'll have women write to me and say, like, am I on that birth control? And I'm like, I, or am I on that hormone therapy? And I'm like, I don't know what you're on. Like, why are you asking me like what you're on? Like, what's going on? Why are you taking something you don't know you're on? This happens a lot, right?
Why my spidey sense was up as soon as, because I
Good for you.
came to him originally because I had estrogen dominance. And like,
Yes.
I'm like, you're right. You need to be a full-time advocate of your own life and everybody else's life, which is not for this podcast, but I mean, you're doing it for everybody essentially in your life. And I
Yeah.
just, my spidey sense was just up about it. And in the meantime, because I'm a fixer and I like to just like, do my own research online, I'm that person because I can't get the answers I need. I've done so much stuff that I haven't been able to get the answers and I finally get it. So it's just, I knew there was like something that I didn't like, and I went to a naturopath, and sure enough, we got the estrogen dominance under control, and now the progesterone's too high because they go like this, right? And it's like, what would have happened if I would have continued on my journey, but I had synthetic progesterone going and pulsing into my system while I fixed the other things? Like, it just felt like I didn't want any extra hormones. That might be different in menopause or as my life goes.
Later on or later on. But also
Yeah.
the term estrogen dominance, no one likes that term. And I don't understand. I've actually seen like Jen Gunter, who is, the guru of women's health, I guess. I've seen her, she refuses to call it estrogen dominant. She'll call it high estrogen. This kind of weird confusion over nomenclature, I think a lot has to do with the pharmaceutical industry and what they like you to say and what they don't like you to say, because why on earth can we not acknowledge that there is estrogen dominance in people? Why can't we just call it what it is? And if you're in perimenopause and your estrogen is high and you're having the symptoms of that aggression, that really sore breasts, whatever else goes on, and you're given estrogen, like that's what the average doctor is going to do, is give you more estrogen
Mhm.
at that point in time.
So
It's just not a nuanced approach.
So you mentioned tools. We're all
Yeah.
about tools here because that's what we're trying to do with our coffee talks with the ladies, and the men that want to watch because they care about their friends and wives and girlfriends
I
or
do.
whatever. What are the tools that you have learned by interviewing and talking to so many people since you started this podcast? The tools that can keep Amy from, murdering me on any given day.
Give me all the tools.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Jennifer Har Jennifer Harrington, who's a really smart naturopathic doctor in Australia, has like a mineral challenge. She just says to women, just get those minerals that you can get, like the little sticks of them without artificial flavors and colors in them. And just do that for 7 days and tell me how you feel. Because micronutrients, minerals are something that we seem to enter this stage lacking. And she said more than half come back and they're feeling so much better and sleeping so much better. So I think that's a really
Oh,
valuable tool. Um,
okay.
very valuable. When it comes to some of the psychological challenges that we have, hypnosis is super effective. When I was at the height of anxiety, I paid, 8 or 9 years ago, these things weren't readily available. I paid a lot for this recording, and it really, really, really helped me. Recently, I did a 3 months of hypnosis every day to address my financial fears, which has nothing to do with it, but it just like that's a tool that I really like. I haven't done an interview about hypnosis per se, but there was a study that went to the Menopause Society annual meeting last fall, and it was it looked at, it was sort of like a roundup of all the hypnosis studies in perimenopause, and they compared it to cognitive behavioral therapy, which is
Mm.
cognitive behavioral therapy is sort of like considered the gold standard non-hormonal treatment for menopause symptoms, but because it's recommended by the menopause societies, and hypnosis came out ahead. And I think this is so interesting because even last year, the Menopause Society in their non-hormonal, or in 2022 in their non-hormonal roundup, they said there were only 2 hypnosis studies. Well, there's 8, and it's incredibly effective for women in perimenopause. And there's so many
Oh,
different ways that you can use hypnosis now. I mean, I have an app called Primed by this guy Elliot Rowe. You pay for it, but it's just like it is such a good tool, and um, I think it's going to gain primacy because it's easy, it's cheap, and for those people who don't like doing therapy, talk therapy, it's a great way to sort of get at the subconscious and sort of redirect some of those beliefs that are driving some of this. Because I think it's like you come into the time with like maybe some wrong belief systems. I'm inadequate. I'm insecure. I believe in scarcity, all these, and then they sort of like hit a fever pitch when the hormones recede and sort of, I call perimenopause sort of like, it's like when the tide goes out and it leaves the garbage on the beach because those hormones are leaving and then it's like all your crap's there and you have to run around and sort of like pick it up. So hypnosis was really helpful for me, and I did talk therapy for 4 years because I had, like you guys, it was very, very, very bad. Like there were times I did not want to be here at different times. I made a recording in my car when I was in London, Ontario visiting, and there was family stuff going on. But you know, when you're just like at the end of your rope and you think, I can't go on and I want to go back and listen to it for my book, but I haven't been able to yet. You know what I mean? To listen to it. And then later on in my early 50s and in that transmenopausal year, which is the year you go without a period, that was a terribly, terribly hard year. I thought I was upside down and inside out. I felt like, Dorothy just like spun all over. But that year I did a couple of things that were so incredibly helpful. I started doing breath work, 9D breath work specifically, which is like this really sort of like on steroids kind of breath work, but you can do any kind. Um, this combines binaural beats and hypnosis, and I I had so much progress in myself and so much relief from that. And then at the same time, I did somatic therapy, like just body work, like the gentle little movements, just the workout which she's on Instagram. I did her course for hips, and I did that all. I remember in a month I did that, and I cried my eyes out, cried like let so much stuff go. And from doing that course, I did a couple more, and then memories were just flooding out of me. Like things that I thought I wasn't upset about would just flood up out of me, and I would bawl and I would just let them go. Like they would like it just was the most transformative thing. So I just feel like you have to address this stuff and work through it and let it go. And
It's amazing to me how much time and energy women spend on losing weight and fitting into size 7 jeans.
yeah,
And, you know, will do wall Pilates and all of this. Like, my God, I mean, I'm older than you are. And God, remember when Dexatrim and teenagers were taking
yeah,
Dexatrim, and not to slash the, I don't even think it exists anymore, but I don't want them to sue us. But, things that like sped you up, right? Like, so, we were giving kids speed essentially. And yet there isn't as much attention on women's mental health as there is on, do you fit into a pair of size 7, Roadrunner jeans when you're in grade 8? I mean, it's mind blowing to me. But Amy, some of the things that Anne Marie is talking about, because you're going through it, you're an advocate for seniors, and I know that it's hard for you to be an advocate for yourself, but these are really good tools that we can do on our own and find them on our own.
and
Mhm.
not time consuming. And
Yeah.
I lost weight. I lost weight doing the workout, which weight was falling off me. And I heard her say that in an Instagram video, and I was like, yeah, I lost weight doing that.
Well, I mean, when
And
you start putting things in order, right? When you get your house in order, that's
yeah,
kind of like the problem I'm dealing with now, right? I've released a bunch of old trauma into my system that I'm dealing with, and that weight's not going to come off until I deal with it, right? And a lot of people just don't dig deep enough. There's so many different reasons why we gain weight or sustain that weight, but you have to look a little deeper. It's not just as easy like to
no,
go on like a dieting program or count calories because there's different stressors too, right? Like when you're trying to lose weight, just on this topic, it's like if you go and calorie restrict, depending on how you do it, that's going to cause stress to your body. If you go and over workout, that's going to cause stress to your body. And so you have to balance that
yeah.
cortisol too.
I don't have a lot of time for discussions about weight loss and meal plans because my weight was up and down my whole life, and it's never been more steady since I sort of like worked through a lot of that stuff.
Hmm.
And um the other thing that's really important for people to know is that it's not always perimenopause. And I have a colleague, Andrea Donsky. She's done a ton of work, like clocking all these menopause symptoms, and there's over 103. But I hear people talking about perimenopause symptoms, and I get really worried. Like I get worried when people talk about their hair falling out. I get really worried when people talk about skin conditions, a lot of these things I think are signs of other things, you know. And I had IBS my whole life, starting from when I basically around when I came to work at the Sun, which I don't think is any sort of accident, because you know, Kimothy, we didn't even talk about like newsroom culture, right? And how brutal that
Ah,
was. That's all on top of it, just
well,
like a horrible, like crazy environment. But I developed, I had IB, you can have IBS for 10 years, 15. You can't have it for as long as I had it. Your body starts running on backup systems, you know, like there's like plugs going. And so a lot of what I thought was perimenopause, when I finally got myself sorted, I had a health breakdown. I had and I was going from doctor to doctor and part to part. I had fatty liver, prediabetes, Hashimoto's, low thyroid, and leaky gut. And I was carrying so much weight. And I would say to people, I don't deserve this weight. Like I don't. So I found the right doctor, thank goodness. She's a, from Norway, a general practitioner with a double specialty in homeopathy, which you would never find in Canada. I don't know how many people would do that. She's a medical doctor and a homeopathic physician. And when I got that sorted out and we balanced everything, like weight was falling off me. It's, you know, so things weren't working inside my body. And again, this is the hormones receding and leaving the garbage on the beach. And this was just another bit of my garbage.
I find it fascinating. You talked about newsroom culture, and you know, I started at 20 in that newsroom,
Oh my God.
and I came in one day in a skirt and knee high boots. You know, when we all used to wear those black knee high boots because you know we saw them in some video or something. And I remember someone, a male, yelling across the newsroom, "Oh, look, here comes Puss in Boots." Imagine doing that today,
No,
right?
no,
And then
no.
you're sent out to murder scenes and, you know, just the culture. Because I was involved when it was the whole, can women go into NHL dressing rooms to actually do their jobs, right? And
Yeah.
I was doing sports for a while. So, I mean, thankfully, a lot of that is just no longer acceptable. I'm sitting here in Florida as I say that. So some things are coming back in certain parts of the world. But to deal with all of that, but um, I, there are so many things that you're saying to me that as someone that I like, I read a lot of stuff, is just shocking to me. Is like I did CBT after the car accident because I had PTSD and trauma. So I know those things, but I never would have associated that with helping those of us who are trying to deal with life, which can get something at times, and then also dealing with what's going on in your body that you don't understand. And I'll be perfectly honest, I'm going back to Ottawa beginning to mid-April. And at 56 years old, I'm still thinking, oh, I want to come back looking like super fit and thinner than I
Yeah.
am now because I'm eating like Louisiana sausages and, you know, trying all the wonderful food.
Mhm.
And still at 56, there's that little thing in my head about you're not thin enough. Like, it drives me crazy. What is
So
the most
listen,
surprising thing you've learned?
that thing about weight is crazy. You know, I lost my father last year, and
Oh, I'm
at
sorry.
his funeral, I was very slender because I'd gone through this fixing, you know, healing. I had been very ill, and then I healed myself, and I came home and I was slender, like people hadn't seen me like that, and that's what people were talking how good I looked.
Right?
It was like crazy, you know. And then I put on a little weight because I'm me, and then the comments stop, and then I mean, I still feel it. You know what I mean? Like
It's in my
I'm an
head.
intuitive eater, and I gave up dieting. So, um, what? Sorry, I forgot what you asked me.
What's the most
Yeah.
shocking thing? I mean, you interview people
Okay.
all over the world, and there must have been a day that, like me right now, listening to you, going, "Oh my God, it all makes sense to me right now." Did you have a moment like that where you went, holy shit," about
I
something?
just, it bothers me how this is being described and how many people are trying to characterize menopause as like a simple accident of nature, an estrogen deficiency that can be corrected. that is such a simplistic view. And if that was the case, it would be the same for everyone. And we have tons of hormones. We have tons of hormone receptors. Our body, like no one has been able to build something like this unbelievable machine that we're in, and the
Oh,
respect that we need to have for it. And this sort of discussion about the way we are, and that, and the discussion around it that's negative in this way makes my heart hurt. And the people that I gravitate to are the smartest about it, because yeah, it's tricky, but what is missing is that after you go through menopause, the way you come home to yourself, like you spend your whole life like looking outward for what everyone else thinks and pleasing other people. What's blown me away in the last couple of years is how I'm finally able to stop over functioning, to say what I think, to have hard discussions, to change some relationships, and to just feel like finally like I'm okay, I'm me, like I can, and the power that I have. And that's the most shocking to me, is that that part of it gets lost in the discussion. I get really mad about it. Like, we're not decrepit old, like the discussion, when you look at social media and the way some doctors are talking, it's just, it enrages me. There's women all over the world killing it. It's not this slide into decrepitude. Uh, it feels like
I,
it sometimes. I'm not gonna lie.
you
I'm
you
not gonna.
just had you just had an Oprah moment. I'm not going to ever forget that. Come home to yourself. Come home
It's.
to yourself.
I get venomous about that part being lost, and people
Yeah.
trying to gloss over that and mess with it. And, there was a doctor in the UK that was trying to rebrand menopause as a female hormone deficiency syndrome. And it just, thank God, didn't take off, because it was ridiculous. It was
Yeah.
ridiculous. That's the thing. But women are really struggling. And I hear stories all the time. Like I just heard it, a friend left me a voice note of her friend in, she's talking about some of her like vagina problems that are just brutal. Like some people are really going through like terribly, terribly hard stuff. And I think a lot of us live like compartmentalized, like, oh, my downstairs isn't okay, but you don't feel okay when the center of you is not okay, right? Like that's the center of your power. I mean, you start looking at like people who do energy work and people who look at in traditional Chinese medicine, like are the center of us. So that's not something to be ignored either. And it's all tied together. We're all like a system. It's not just a hormone, a body part.
Think
Amy,
that,
are you okay?
oh, I'm fine. I'm
She
taking
okay?
it
What
in.
was she doing?
Well, she's got that look on her face that I'm familiar with, which is a kind of a combination between like holy cow and maybe I'm going to go out and hunt and kill those people who hurt me. I'm not sure which one of those it is right now.
It's such a good conversation, Anne Marie. Thanks for having this with us. I find that you're right. I think that it's really challenging as someone in this exact position, right? To be able to communicate all the stuff because one, I don't want to, and two, like, yeah, I wish you could, people would take it for face value when you say, "Hey, I'm just dealing with stuff," and understand that maybe like you back off a little bit or whatever that looks like, instead of me having to like, I'm no rage monster over here by any means, but instead of having to like explain the things, and it's like, oh, like I've told you guys more in this conversation than I would general public, right? And obviously very, very public now, but in general, it's like you don't, like you are walking around with all of this stuff inside you and you're just trying to sort it out in your spare time more than anything because you're taking care of little ones, you're taking care of older ones, you're taking care of you're taking care of dogs and cats and whatever. Plus you're working, plus you're going to school meets or whatever is happening. It's kind of the same message of the self-care aspect, just kind of thrown on the side of your desk and you'll pick around at it when you can. But advocating for yourself is exhausting because you're advocating for everybody else all the time as well. I'm advocating for my kid, my husband, my pets, my clients, myself. And you just like you're on a hamster wheel. And I
It's
don't
too
think
much.
that people really
Yeah.
understand that.
And don't like in perimenopause. First of all, I felt really alone and I was single for a lot of it, but I've since found out that everyone feels alone. It doesn't matter if you have a partner or not. That's like a pretty universal feeling. Another universal feeling is that you're dying, like something is wrong with you because something is wrong different with you every day or every week. I was at a GCC menopause summit and one of the doctors said she had a patient who said she was fine at the top of the stairs and by the time she got to the bottom, she was in a bad, like a sad mood, right? Like it's that much. So another thing that really helped me is the work of Cheryl Paul because I had a lot of health anxiety. Like I was always trying to get to the bottom of what was going on with me and feeling like, I lost my mom when she was 53 to pancreatic cancer when I was 27. So that was
Oh,
always
gosh.
looming, right? Like looming large. That was a fast thing. And so I found Cheryl Paul, who I just love. She wrote a book called The Wisdom of Anxiety. And health anxiety is a really big thing anyway. But her sort of antidote to it is like, if it's very serious, it will become apparent. And when you're feeling health anxiety, what are you not giving yourself? And so when I start like think, it's the funny thing about having gone through menopause is this stuff is all there, but it's very like whispers of it. Like it'll start and then I'm like, oh yeah, I don't do that anymore. Like it's just like sort of like I'll think, oh, I'm gonna go out and party, and then I'm like, oh, I don't do that anymore. Like the thought's still there, that the memory of it. So
What would I wear? What would I
yeah,
wear?
yeah, exactly. So asking yourself, like, okay, I'm having health anxiety. First of all, let's give it 5 days. That's what I always did. I started to do because in 5 days, most everything you're worried about is gone, and you're not going to die in 5 days. Obviously, if you need to go to the emergency room. But just asking yourself, okay, what have I not been giving myself? And most of the time, there's something, right? Like you've been pouring everyone to fill everyone else's cup and not your own. Maybe you're yearning to, I don't know, just go for a walk, do some art, something. One of the most powerful people I talked to in all of it was in that transmenopausal year, this guy, Srini Bhatt, at a resort I got to go to in Koh Samui in Thailand. And um, you can listen to that podcast because I posted it at Hotflash Inc. But he just talks about your inner child, and he explained it to me in a way that just like broke my heart and really changed me because he said, think of your inner child like, you know, he said, do you have a niece or nephew? I said, yeah, I have a niece. I adore her. And he said, well, imagine if she wanted to hang out with you, but you just said, sit in that chair and I'm just going to work. And then we can play when you're done. And then you just left her there all day, every day. It's heartbreaking, right? Like that's heartbreaking. And he said, that's kind of what's happening with you, with your inner child. And that's a lot of these anxieties that come up when Cheryl Paul talks about the wisdom of anxiety is like, what is it trying to tell me? I had tons of anxiety during perimenopause about things like people dying in car crashes. I had a lot of intrusive thoughts. I started to think, okay, I'm going to tell my brother or my dad, they have to text me back right away because they don't know how anxious I get. But you can't be like that with people, right? Cheryl Paul talks a lot about worrying about her kids and like wanting to call them, but knowing she can't call them because she's got to let them go and be on their own. Um, and so I think a lot of times when these like bouts of anxiety come, that's a good thing to do.
If we were men, would this be a different industry?
I was just thinking about that because that's a really that plays really well in social media, right? And a lot of the big
Yeah.
influencers do this all the
And
time.
yeah,
And
and that's why I'm asking because people point to, well, they developed Viagra because men were having problems in their older age, and now it's a big pharmaceutical thing. And so I've heard that is that no, this is discrimination. But you talk to all the experts. Is
I
it?
don't
Is
think
it
so.
because we're women?
I think that's simplistic. I do because
Yeah.
men have a version of this called andropause, and a lot of men are having low testosterone. And I spoke to a British doctor about this, Quentin Ury, and he said, men have even more of a reason not to tell anyone that they're feeling a certain way and that their libido is low and that they don't feel energetic. There's a lot of shame for them. And so they have different reasons why it's hard. And I sort of think I don't do that on social media, talk this way. I think it's sort of playing to the peanut gallery in assuming that things would be easier if this was all done by men. I've heard that 1,000 times. And I don't
Yeah.
really, I guess, I mean, yes, there's more studies on Viagra in men than there are on perimenopause and hormone therapy, for example. But there's also more study on cows and hormone therapy than there are on women and hormone therapy. And that's it's commercial. It's about commerce. There, Viagra was approved and it's sold. There was a testosterone patch for women 20 years ago, and it was rejected by the FDA. And so I think you can make it simplistic about men, but I think a lot of the times it has more to do with money.
Well, Amy, I know you've probably got a question, but I wanted to just say I came across this as well when I was doing work in child sexual abuse. And, it becomes front page news when star hockey players are brave enough, like truly brave enough to say that it happened to them, because we know statistically boys are victims not as we know as much as women, but that's because the reporting is so low. And so when we lose empathy for, let's call it the other side, we don't see what you just articulated is it's not a war between the sexes. So thank you for clarifying that, because I think it's a very important point.
Well, I've also dated a lot, and I dated younger men, which was fun. And men
Me
in
too.
their 40s are, yeah, I like it more. Men my age people, I don't know. But anyway, but I dated, and I find that guys in their 40s are a little bit more open about this stuff, and they're struggling. They're not okay.
Yeah.
They're having really a hard time with a lot of things, trauma, many of the same things that we are. So I think that's I think that's too simplistic. And I don't think it's helpful. I saw an article the other day that said if you think womanhood is difficult, and I was like, okay. I mean, what is this helping? Right? What now it's just womanhood is difficult. We're humans. We're
Yeah. And
all
the world
human.
is hard. The world is hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Life is challenging.
It's really difficult. I mean, that's why we do this, right? And I mean, you've got a huge community as well, and it's really important that people can find resources and they don't feel alone and really show people and talk openly like this. And thank you for doing that. Um, that there's all of us are dealing with stuff, right? And it's just, when we talk to our guests, which piece is going to be that piece for someone today, right? And I'm hoping that this talk helps people just take another step on their health journey and also know that like you can trust your instinct and try to move forward to that. How do you feel about your community, Anne Marie, and not feeling alone? Do you find that people come to you because that's where they start, or how does that develop with your community?
Well, it's an interesting learning to trust yourself is part of the reason we go through this, I think, by the way, too. Um, that's my belief. Well, it's an interesting combination, that community, because it's practitioners. So I've met these amazing women from all over the world. And if people are thinking of things that they're going to do that are new, I think you can only think of the things that are scary, and you don't think of the things that are great because you can't imagine them. So, I know experts all over the world, really smart people in business, doctors, and then the women that I meet that are just so smart, because Hotflash Inc attracts like a thinking, not that people aren't thinking who don't come to Hotflash, but it's like someone who's like, okay, I think this is a bit more complex than the way it's being portrayed. And I've grown less quickly because of that, because it's a sort of a moderate middle ground, and we know how the polarities play. So I have just heard and met and talked to some really amazing people. And sometimes people will just email me and just pour their heart out. And I always take time to write back. I wrote to someone last week and she said, I write to other people and no one write back. No one writes back. And it means so much to me. Like, I never thought I would have that kind of experience. I never even thought about that when I did this. I just thought I have to start putting out this information. It's been a lot. It's been good for me, really good for me.
So let's tell everybody then how to find you, because as you know, I wrote to you to explain we're launching this on International Women's Day, and there's going to be 300 women in that room that we're going to share this information with. And I strongly believe this topic is going to be one of our podcast's highest views because it impacts so many women. How do they find you? And tell us a bit about the book you're writing.
Okay, so I'm Hotflash Inc. all across Instagram, TikTok, on Substack, which is where I put out my newsletter, hotflashinc.com, X, And where else? Where else? I don't know where
Where
else.
else? Everywhere. So all of that, Instagram,
All of that.
Facebook,
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
that. And then that's how they can watch you as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
Okay.
YouTube.
And
Yeah.
on
And the
YouTube.
book. So my plan moving forward, I just did this, like I just had to do this. So I have monetized in a way, but this is the year that I get serious about this being a business because I can't keep doing it without it being, I want to do it full time.
Mhm.
So my plan this year is I'm going to write a book, some sort of plan, your plan for perimenopause, whether you're in it or whether you're younger, like concrete, because so many of the books I read, there's just like too much in there and it goes off in all directions. So I just want to distill it and make it very clear, but also present to people that whoever you end up in front of could influence how you treat this and influence the rest of your life. So if you end up in front of your OBGYN and she tells you to take an IUD and you do use the IUD and then you go straight into like, combo hormone therapy, maybe you didn't know all the information. So that's the point. And then I've been creating this expert panel and I'm going to make a summit from the expert panel and then I'm going to do a course. I'm going to teach a course live
Oh,
to just walk people through everything
oh.
that I have in the book if they don't feel like reading the book. Yeah, that's
No,
the
I
plan.
want to take that. I want to take that course because I think there's a segment of the population that, even though we're through it, is going to be really receptive to what the hell happened to me.
Yep.
Because I'm healing wounds from some bad behaviors that I did because my life was just completely in, when you see those like race cars, like just spinning around on a racetrack. And so as I work through my healing process, it's like, what the hell was that? Oh,
Okay.
I'd be very excited to take a
Well,
course.
you're both invited as my guest for the
Oh,
course.
yay.
Awesome.
I think of course would be nice too. I educate for a living myself, and I feel like the more types of platforms you can give people, whether it's reading or visual or whatnot, I think that that just goes a long way. For myself, I'm a visual learner, right? So although I have been reading a lot of books trying to solve my crap right now, but generally I would watch something or whatnot. So that's really, really great. Thanks for sharing that.
And Anne Marie, she's being really modest. She's a best-selling author, so knows a thing or two about communicating. So, I
Okay,
I
well, maybe I'll
feel
touch base in the background.
I
Bye.
feel like I have spent a shit ton of money on therapy, and I feel like I should have just talked to you for an hour. I'm just like, like I have that feeling of, oh, other people get me. I'm just not trying to explain my situation to somebody for an
No,
hour
that's exhausting. Yeah.
and then just doing and how are you feeling about that? I don't know. That's why I came here.
Yeah.
I'm so
Yeah.
grateful that we got to reconnect, and I do hope that we could have you back again.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, so much. It's so great to talk to
Yeah.
people around the world and back in my adopted hometown. We're not in
Yeah.
Ottawa, but I feel like I'm in Ottawa when I'm talking to you.
Well, Amy is close to Ottawa in a very beautiful area. I won't identify because we don't want to tell people where we're at exactly. But yeah, next time you come to your hometown, if it happens to be when I'm there, I would love to see you again.
Yeah. It's so great to talk to you guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Anne Marie. And thanks everybody for joining us today. I hope that you got a lot of valuable tidbits. I know Kimothy and I did. We're probably writing mental notes right now. But I hope that you were able to get something from this podcast today. Remember to like and subscribe and hit the notify button for us. And until then, we'll see you next time on The Inner Shift.